Some stories fade with time, buried beneath silence, lost in forgotten files, or dismissed as mysteries that will never be solved. But behind every case is a voice that was never heard, a truth still waiting in the dark. This channel is dedicated to the victims, the unanswered questions, and the stories that refuse to disappear. Because somewhere, someone still knows what happened. Welcome to Cries Unheard in the Darkness. It was May 14, 2008. In the small town of Marshall, Minnesota, the air was beginning to hold the warmth of approaching summer. For 19-year-old Brandon Swanson, it was a night of transition. He had just finished his spring semester at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Like any college student, he wanted to celebrate the end of exams and the freedom of the months ahead. Brandon spent the evening with friends in Canby. By all accounts, it was a normal, happy night. But as midnight came and went, Brandon decided it was time to head home. He had a 30-mile drive ahead of him, a drive he had made many times before. But on the flat, winding backroads of Lyon County, familiar can become treacherous in a heartbeat. Somewhere along the way, Brandon's Chevy Lumina veered. Maybe he was tired, maybe a deer darted out, or maybe the darkness just played a trick on his eyes. The car slid into a ditch. It wasn't a violent crash. Brandon was unhurt, but the car was high-centered. The wheels spun fruitlessly against the Minnesota soil. Stranded but calm, Brandon did what any of us would do. He reached for his cell phone. He called his parents, Brian and Annette. He told them he'd run off the road near Lind. It seemed like a minor inconvenience, a late-night rescue mission for a dad and son. But as Brian and Annette climbed into their pickup truck to go find him, they had no idea they were about to walk into a nightmare that has lasted nearly 2 decades. For the next 47 minutes, the phone was a lifeline. Brandon stayed on the line with his parents as they drove toward Lind. They flashed their lights. Brandon flashed his too. "Do you see me now?" Brian would ask. "No," Brandon would respond. "Try again." The frustration grew. How could they be in the same small area and not see each other's headlights in the pitch-black darkness of the prairie? Eventually, Brandon decided to leave the car. He saw lights in the distance, a glow he was certain was the town of Lind. He told his father to meet him at the local bar's parking lot. He began to walk. Through the phone, his parents could hear the sound of footsteps. They heard him describe passing fences and hearing the sound of rushing water nearby. He didn't sound disoriented. He sounded determined. Then, at 2:30 a.m., the conversation ended with 2 words that still haunt the Swanson family. Brandon suddenly shouted, "Oh shit." The line stayed open, but Brandon was gone. His parents called back over and over. They searched until the sun came up, but there was no sign of their son and no sign of the car. At 6:30 a.m., the Swansons went to the Lind police. The response they received became a point of pain that later led to a change in state law. Initially, authorities were dismissive. They suggested that a 19-year-old had a right to be missing, that perhaps he was just sleeping off a night of partying. But Brandon's parents knew better. This wasn't a night out. This was a disappearance in the middle of a phone call. When the Lyon County sheriff finally pulled the cell records, the mystery took a sharp and confusing turn. Brandon wasn't near Lind at all. His cell phone pings placed him 25 miles away, near the town of Taunton. He had been walking in the opposite direction of where he thought he was. Search teams eventually found the Chevy Lumina near the Lincoln County line. It was exactly as Brandon described, stuck on a sharp incline, but undamaged. But from there, the trail went cold. Bloodhounds were brought in. They picked up a scent that led across abandoned farms and toward the Yellow Medicine River. The dogs followed the scent right to the water's edge. At the time, the river was high and fast-moving, nearly 10 feet deep in some areas. The theory was simple. Brandon had tripped in the dark, fallen into the river, and been swept away. But the river theory has holes. One dog followed the scent out of the water on the other side and along a different road before the trail vanished. If Brandon had drowned, why was no body ever found, despite years of intensive searching and the use of human remains dogs. Authorities have searched over 120 square miles. They've used horses, ATVs, and aerial flyovers. They've moved the search to Mud Creek and followed every tip that came through the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Yet not a single piece of Brandon, not his clothing, not his phone, not his glasses has ever been recovered. His mother, Annette, doesn't believe he's in the river. His father, Brian, remembers his son's voice as clear and lucid. Could there have been foul play? Sheriff Weizsäcker once speculated that someone in the shadows might have crossed paths with Brandon. Or did he simply succumb to the elements in a location that has yet to be turned over? The tragedy led to the passage of Brandon's Law in Minnesota, which mandates that police must take an immediate report and begin an investigation for missing persons of any age, regardless of the circumstances. For 5 years, the Swansons left their porch light on every single night, a beacon for a son who was just trying to find his way home. Brandon Swanson remains missing. He would be in his late 30s today. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Brandon Swanson, please contact the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. Thanks for listening to Cries Unheard in the Darkness. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Subscribe, because the darkness always has more to say. Until next time, listen carefully,